Introduction. Yes, I enjoy my time at Raffles very much, not only because of one student, but because of all my students. Yes, there you go, the ones in the back. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is how do you actually want to make people work for you? So we often talk about like how, or in the seminars before, you've heard about how to start your own business, like what do you need, and you heard different stories. Now we had very interesting cultural observations. So mine is going to be focused more on the people and how you actually engage them. So how you can be a good boss. It's going to be based on my own experience and of course research that supports it. So you have a little bit more of, it's a little bit more solid. But for my students, they already know, I don't like just talking at people, I like interacting with people. So I will need your input. So I will ask questions, and those questions are not rhetorical, I will need you to answer. So I will need your cooperation, okay? So, just to see if you understand, this is my first question. What does every company need? So again, actual question for you. What do you think?
People.
Maybe not German. Maybe someone else. Yes, what did you say? Leaders, yes. More basic than that.
Vision.
Vision. Vision, yes, exactly. You need vision, but what also do you need? Once you have a vision, what do you need?
Mission.
Mission. Other stuff we learned, yeah. Yes, you also need a mission, but you need something that makes you carry out the vision. And yes, wait, was that Joe? Yeah. Thank you. Exactly. So human resource, or what we're going to say, you need people. People are a resource that we often forget. So I've been working in HR for some time in different industries, as you've heard, and we often take this for granted, and we don't actually invest enough in our people. So today what we're going to talk about is basically how we can make sure that people want to stay with our company, okay? So, just on average, the average person will spend 45 years at work. So I'm already, as you heard, I'm already a couple of years in. Then you work around 2,000 hours per year, which is 90,000 hours during those 45 years. So why am I showing you these numbers? It's because I want you to see how much time you're actually going to spend at work. And this is on average, right? Some countries work more, some countries work less on average, and then even in the countries, there's very diverse ways of working. So you better make sure that the time you work is actually going to be enjoyable. So, second question. What kind of working environment would you like? And I don't want you to tell me oh, I would like to work for I don't know, Google, or I would like to work for Chatime or Brown, whatever, but more kind of characteristics. What kind of working environment would you like? We don't know.
Google.
Okay. But why? Why?
Why? Doesn't know. Google.
Yeah, just
Google-ish.
okay, yeah, Google-ish. But why would we? I think many of us would like to work for Google, but why?
Great food.
Great food, okay, yeah, that's one, yes.
Freedom.
Yes, thank you. So we often think about it's freedom. People there get to choose how they work, they get to choose when they work, and everyone likes working at Google, right? That's something that we would like too, okay? So, because currently, unfortunately, that's not what it looks like. Stress is one of the most, or one of the highest costs that we have as a company, because especially in the Western world, and then we also heard Japan, Singapore, it just happens that people work a lot. We feel like we have to, and stress causes several diseases, not just physically, but also mentally, and that costs companies a lot of money. So also to support my claim, just a couple of statistics. So last year, 48 million, this is all for 2014, 48 million people changed their jobs because they were not happy. Then we have 2 hours on average that are being wasted. Out of 8 hours, that's a fourth. That's quite a lot of time we're wasting. And we have over 50% of 18 to 44-year-olds. Why this group? Because so we can be in the same, more or less, age group. We want more than just a high salary. We want more freedom and more flexibility. And last but not least, so almost 70% of millennials want more freedom at work. So that's something that we expect, more freedom to choose. And this is actually the scariest one of them all. For last year, of the people surveyed, only 13% of people actually like to go to work. And it's true, I know that, for example, just recently I had a conversation with one of my friends back in Switzerland, and she said, well, except for you, I don't know anyone that likes their job. So all of us just say, I just have to have a job that I don't hate. And that's not what we want, right? If you want, and most of you, I guess, usually when I ask students what they want to be or what they want to have, here as well as the other universities where I teach, they say they want to own their own business. Okay? So if it's your business, you don't want only 13% of your people to be happy at work. You would like everyone to be happy at work. So fortunately, there is something that we can do. We have weapons to fight this current state, and it is flexible working models. So I'm going to talk about something to give you an idea of how things can be different from the traditional 9 to 5. And it's also what I do now, obviously, because I have more than one job. So maybe you feel like, oh, but how could this be applied? So we're going to go through this, and then hopefully you will have lots of questions of how you could actually do this here at the end. So the one I'm going to present is ROWE, Results Only Working Environment. So that wasn't created by me. It was created by Jodie Thompson and Callie Ressler. And what it means is basically that instead of getting paid for the hours you work, so instead of getting paid for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, or even more or less, you get paid for your output, which seems much more fair, which is a system that doesn't punish people that are effective. So personally, the company where I worked in before, that's what I was telling Nick before as well, we had a system where we had to badge in. So basically, if I would come at like 8, I would have to badge in, and then they would count the time while I was there and then badge out when I left. And that didn't really count how productive I was. And what I would see is that sometimes I would be, or most often, I would be finished with the type of work I had, so maybe in 2-3 hours, that other people would take 5 or 6 hours. So what would happen is that I would just get more work and more work and more work. And then this, I mean, if you think it's very counterproductive because effective people are being punished, or that's how I felt, and I think that's how all of us would feel. So what happens is that many people start just working slower because they don't want more work. And that's how they spend their time. If we think back of the statistics, that's how the 2 hours of waste happen, because people are trying to push it back in this system. Whereas if we have an environment where the results are the most important part, what you can do is you choose, you have complete autonomy over your project, which is amazing. So that means you choose when and how and even where from you will work. That's something that I wished for and that I now have. We will go into like my examples in a little bit, but just the to emphasize that the how is not so important and the where and when, okay? That's your choice. And of course, there are some fields where this is very difficult or impossible, like customer-facing fields. For example, for my teaching hours, I can't choose when am I going to teach, right? Like maybe I'm a night person, but probably most students won't really come at like 10 p.m. That's maybe a little late to teach. So there are things where you have to compromise, and the same is for my trainings, obviously. I can't set the training times, but what I can do, and the same for classes, is I choose when I will prepare for my classes. I choose how and when I will prepare for my trainings. So sometimes I might work in the morning, sometimes because I teach in the mornings, I might work in the afternoon. Maybe if I have a training coming up because I'm more active towards the late afternoon and night, I will choose to work at night. And that makes me much more productive because I'm choosing the time where I am more productive. So what are some of the advantages? For this one, I'm going to tell you a couple of advantages. Let me just click through so they all appear. There we go. So obviously, like, that's what I've experienced too. So teamwork source, like you get people working more together because they have to get somewhere. Then also engagement. People are much happier because they feel they're trusted. They feel they're actually more important. Then your productivity and efficiency actually increases. It's often something that people feel like, oh no, but if you let people work when they want to work, they won't work at all. But it's actually not true, and research supports this. So it's about 29, so almost 30% an increase in productivity, which of course then leads to an increase in revenue as well if you are more productive. Then they attract talent and they retain it. So remember, 70% of millennials want more freedom, right? And our age group, we're looking for work options with more flexible options, right? So this is what we're looking for in an employer as well. And this is something that can be very attractive. That's why we want to work for Google or Apple or other companies like that. What I mean with optimization of space, so offices are not necessarily cramped, and then elimination of wasteful processes is not just like in terms of paper trail or stuff like that. It's also just we banish like unnecessary meetings, because sometimes, or also, so sometimes what would happen is when I worked in the office, people would pop in and then they would discuss something, then they would leave. I'd be disrupted in my work. We would set up meetings for stuff that really didn't need meetings. So in this type of system, you actually meet when you have to. And you know when you're meeting that it's necessary for you to be there, which for most meetings in my last job, so a big multinational as you heard, wasn't always the case. Often I would just sit there and wonder, why am I even here? I could be doing so many different things right now that would be more helpful. Okay? And then, yes, it saves costs, obviously, but also the point that I would like to stress, excuse the pun, but it's the less stress part. So, as we've established before, or as I claimed and you hopefully believe, that stress is one of the things that costs companies billions these days. And this system makes our working environment less stressful. And that's a very, very big advantage. Okay, so, but there's not only advantages, there's also obstacles. So with this type of system, what kind of obstacles or what kind of issues can you imagine that happen? So again, that's a question for you. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Kim. So we're scared that people might behave unethically, so that we can't really let them work from home because they don't know what they're doing. Maybe they don't know what they're doing because we don't guide them enough. We feel like we can't just let them run off on their own. What else? Other ideas? What? Yes, please, louder. Laziness. Yes, exactly. So we think that if people work from home, they will be more lazy. Because we feel at work, we can supervise them. As we heard when Nick was sitting with his people, they felt uncomfortable because they're like, oh, he's trying to supervise them. We have to work harder right now. So that's the idea we have. Maybe if we can think of one more thing. Yeah, so what we stated was that it's not applicable for every field. So it's maybe easier for certain fields, like in mine, but production, could it really be, or as we established with customer-facing fields, like customer service, sales, these type of fields, this working environment is not. Sometimes people also state there is a lack of communication. If you have a team of 4 people and they all work whenever they want, we feel like there will be a lack of synergy, people won't work together, they won't really communicate well together.
I think also with the independency, like in most Asian culture, we're not trained to be individuals.
Yeah.
So all we want to be a follower, we need a leader. And if you leave them on their own, they get lost. And that's on the Western side, we're more individualists, we work better alone.
Yeah, definitely. So that's another very important point. It depends, as you've heard before as well, on the culture. So, which means that this system doesn't mean that it's not applicable here or that you can't implement it here. It just means that for a working environment or for a cultural environment like Cambodia is, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to take different types of steps to implement it. But the good thing is that actually there's a way of overcoming all of these. Okay, so this is what I'm doing again, and this is what is like my advice. So the first obstacle that, or the first way we can address this issue is that the people you recruit, so the people you hire. This is often a little bit underestimated because HR here, not just here, but here especially, is still seen as sort of like an administrative function. And so this part is like, oh, we need new people, so you create a profile, but you don't really think about what kind of, competencies you would like the people to have, what type of attitudes would be good. And that's something that you have to look for. So one of the main things that this system needs is trust. And if you don't have the right people, you don't have trust. Like what we said before, ooh, they might be lazy. If you recruit the right people, you're not going to fear that they're lazy. Okay? And then same for if we think like they might not do their work properly, not do the thing. So if you have to have trust, and I know that's something that is not easy. We always feel like trust is this thing that we only can give to people that they earn it. But I can tell you from my own experience, if you actually do entrust people with important tasks, that they actually surprise you more often than not. Then you have to have clear job descriptions. That's something that I encounter here a lot, not just here, but we're going to be talking specifically about Cambodia. People are working, but they don't really know what they're working for, or they're not really clear what their responsibilities are. If you want to work in a results-only working environment, people need to clearly know what their area is. If they don't, then nothing's going to happen, because then there's confusion, right? And connected to that is like they have to have clear goals. And these goals should support the company goals. If you're doing something that doesn't support your company goals, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. That is like, so it sounds so simple, but that is one issue that I've encountered. People would say, no, but I have to do this. And if you ask them, but why? They don't really know why. They can't really answer. And then this, I mean, you probably heard it in your business classes before. You should set SMART goals. So they should be specific and measurable. So how do you know that you have actually achieved the goal? So instead of saying something like, for example, we want to have, I don't know, more trainings by the end of the year, we're going to say how many more. So we want to have maybe 5 more organizations that we partner with in trainings. That's something that's specific and measurable. Then it has to be like attainable and realistic. So if you've done your research, you know approximately what your competitors can do. That gives you an idea of what you can do as well. And those goals should be set in a way that you know your people can reach it. If they're not realistic, let's say, for example, we work with some website providers, and I tell them, oh, I need my website to stand the next day. That's not a realistic goal. I mean, it's very simplified, but we often feel everything that we want and we say is urgent and needs to be done immediately. Okay. Then, so now we have the first part, you have the right people, you have clear job descriptions, and you have goals. Then you need to monitor performance. So if you're the leader in this type of situation, you will need to make sure and follow up. So for me personally here, with some people, so it depends. Some people are very independent, they're very self-sufficient. So I basically just check in a couple of times to see how they do. But with some people, especially when they're inexperienced or just starting, you need to check in more frequently, you know. So people are saying, like, how does this apply to this market? We have maybe 3-4 Cambodians freelance that we work with for the trainings, and there's 2 of them that I check in with very frequently because they just started working with us. So in the beginning, they're a little bit lost. They don't know, like, so how am I supposed to do this? Like, so I provide a little bit more guidance. But with the 2 ones that we work longer with, they're much more independent as well. So they get there. Everyone gets there in time. Some might take a little bit longer, some might take a little bit shorter, but it is definitely possible. You just need to remember that you as the manager, you have to follow up. You can't just give them the goals and tasks and then just check on the day the deadline, you know, the project is due. It doesn't work that way. Maybe with some of your, like with my business partner, that's how it works, because I completely know she's going to do it. So I don't need to check in with her like every single step. But with my more new ones or more inexperienced ones, and even the medium ones, I check in a little bit more. So, and then last but not least, we were talking about this maybe a little bit in terms of feedback, but which I'm going to say a couple of words as well. So we need to work as a team. What I mean is, like, you need to actually know your people. So we talked about, in the marketing sense, you need to know what makes your people tick, so your target audience. And we often neglect to understand what makes the people in our team tick. Like, what is important to them? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? So we have to build that. And of course, then one way is feedback. So just because the question arose before, in terms of feedback, how I do it is, like, for those of you that have been in my communication class, they learn about the bio method. So it's a behavior, then the impact it has on you, and then the outcome. So instead of saying to someone like, oh, you're always interrupting me, blah, 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 blah. That's aggressive. That's, my mic goes away. That's attacking. So what you would say is, like, I've noticed that you interrupted me a couple of times. That makes me feel like you don't really appreciate my opinion. So I suggest that maybe next time you wait till I'm finished. Very simple, but in this way, it's much less personal, and it also makes it about you. So it's not about the other person, it's about how it makes you feel. And it sounds like it might not make a difference, but it makes a big difference, because then people do not go into defense automatically, but they think about it. And if more than one person tells them this, then they obviously will also start changing that behavior. And yes, like in this market with the Cambodians, it takes some time until they're actually comfortable to share feedback. And in the beginning, like for example, when I would feel like I'm always the bad guy, and I always have to tell the people like, oh no, but this and this and this. But now actually, you can see that there's a little bit of a change. So people are actually, they understand that it's not an attack. They understand that it's actually helpful because the other people are improving. So they're getting better at it. What still, like, but it's, as Nick said, you always try to also add something positive, because otherwise people are very depressed. Whereas with like my, you know, the ones that are foreigners that I work with, especially if they are also from the German culture or like some Eastern Europeans, like it's much easier. I can be like, no, this is not good, I would suggest you do it this way, and it's fine. I don't have to tell them, but you do this very well, so that's fine, that works. And how that is building the team is because you have a circle of honesty and trust, so people feel more comfortable to share these things. If they don't feel this sense of trust, then they will also not feel comfortable to share. And yes, it takes quite a long time to get there, especially because there's the hierarchical difference, and people are not used, it's very hard for them to give feedback to someone that's their boss. So it takes a long time for them to get there. Okay. So when did I first experience this? This is me when I was more closer to your age, so 7 years ago. God, it's so long. Okay, so I worked for the student organization, ISEC, and we were in the national support team. So that's the 4 of us. We were in the support team. Here it actually looks like I'm leading it, but this is actually our manager. So I was just the one that's speaking. And I thought this picture was better to show you. So basically we were doing talent management, so everything connected to talent management, from the recruitment to induction to member management, their opportunities, etc. What was why we had to adopt this type of working model was because we were all based in different locations. So there was two of us. Us two were in Zurich. He was in Basel, she was in Lugano, and she was in Bern. So that probably doesn't tell you anything, except that they're very different cities. So we couldn't really meet physically and work in one office. And additionally, like, we were also still studying, and some of us were working next to having this activity as well. So there was no way that we could have had like office times. But we would still make sure that at least once a month we all met physically in Bern to discuss whatever was necessary. And then of course also, if you think about it, when we had conferences that we had to run, or again trainings, that would be face-to-face, so that we had to make sure that we were there at a certain time. So it's a little bit like a mixture. Okay. So it looks a little bit packed, but this is just to show you that we achieved quite a lot. We actually surpassed the goals that we had. I'm not going to go into each detail, but I'm going to focus more on why that was possible. So it was possible because, first of all, we were all committed, obviously. So our manager we all had to apply for these positions, and she had chosen the right people to work for this. Then also, we were all working at a time that was convenient for us, which helped a lot, which increased our efficiency and productivity, definitely. For me, for example, so I know that I'm not a morning person at all. So for my students who are actually lucky because they know, so I have 2 dogs, so I get up at 6 every day. So when I come to class at 8, I've already been awake for 2 hours, so the grumpiness is gone. But generally, I'm much more productive in the late afternoon and at night. So obviously for me, this was ideal because I could work on everything that was conceptual, that I could develop, if it was the induction process or how to adapt the competency model, all these kind of things I could do at whatever time I wanted. But as I mentioned, there was also a couple of things that we had to be there physically. Like we had train-the-trainer conferences, which means we were developing other trainers because we needed them for our training cycle. And we also had leadership development conferences. So 6 conferences in total. So a lot of the things that are connected to organizing the conferences need to happen at a specific time. Like if you want to book the venue for an event, I can't do that at midnight. So that has to be during working hours or regular working hours, as we would say. But, for example, the preparation for it, so the sessions or lectures, so to say, that I can prepare at whatever time I want. So that's the first time I got in contact with this. And for me, that's something I loved because I really saw that it could work. Like I really saw that we did achieve much more than the generation before, and that actually it just made me very happy to work that way. Let's be like that. Whereas, coming back to my previous example, badging in, that made me very unhappy. So compared to these two, I knew that when I came here, I wanted to have something more flexible. So, as you can see, so that's me training, telling people what to do, something I like a lot. Okay, so basically what we do is a mixture between training and consulting. But I'm not here to plug my own organization, I'm here to plug what we do and why it's so good. So, I work freelance, I work for different companies, and I'm building my own brand as well. And how do we actually apply the Row work environment for us? We have flexible working hours. So none of us is actually full-time. All of us are like me, I lecture part-time at universities. We have some people that work for different organizations. We have some that are in more than one organizations because they're freelancer. So we don't really have anyone that is full-time. So we have flexible working hours. If I'm talking about a training, like if we meet with a client and I find out what they want, so what they exactly need, then the training design, if it's one of my people that is working on it, I leave it to them. They're the ones that are doing the design. If they do it on Saturday morning or Monday afternoon, I don't care, as long as it's done before, before the actual training. So as long as it's done when the deadline is due. So we also use home office. By this I don't mean that we necessarily work from home, but sometimes people work from coffee shops, or they work from their other offices, which they can use. I mean, we do have an office space that we use for physical meetings. So usually we meet twice a week, just to check up on progresses, to plan what is going to come, sometimes just once a week, and then of course individually we might meet virtually, or we might meet physical as well. So I have 2-3 people that collaborate with me that are not in Cambodia, that are in either Croatia, and one is in Germany. So they can obviously not attend physically, but they do so virtually. So we also have virtual meetings. And then of course the client meetings are physical, they're face-to-face. They're set by the client, we go, and then the trainings are physical as well. So it's 2 parts. You have the flexible working part, and you have the physical part that you still need to do as well. Coming a little bit back, like moving away from, it's just to show you that it's not just me that really wants that, but it's actually that a lot of people are willing to give up many things, so to sacrifice a lot of things to have more freedom and flexibility in the workplace. So it's seen as one of 3 perks next to like reputation, or of course your salary in a company, how much freedom you can have. And that's definitely something not just I've seen with myself, but that I've experienced in the European countries I worked in. And if you think about, who of you was here when we had the presentation with chat time and like Sprint Limited, right? That's their name. Yeah, you were here, some of you were here. So they were also presenting a different type of office, a different type of working, so with mostly the young people they have. So it's also a concept that is not that, maybe it's not that known yet, but it is happening already here. So, also that's my personal belief, and I hope you would agree, it's the way of the future. So on one hand, we have the technological like progress or revolution, as we would say. So we work with our computers, we work with the virtual world much more than we had a couple of years ago, and it's getting more and more, and it's immersing every part of life. It's not just the personal, but also the professional. And clearly it's also part of education, as you know, and, or as you hopefully experience, and it's also part of work. Most of us, when we work, we use a computer. So which means that it gives us the opportunity to work remotely. So it gives us, because the main tool is not us being physically there, but it's a tool that we can take anywhere. It's mobile. We can connect to the network from any other point, not just the office. Then what I mean with gender equality, so even though, yes, we have made progress as women, still traditionally, for most families, it's the woman that once children are there, stays at home, and they feel they can't really work in the same sense anymore. So some countries are already applying this more than others. For some it's even more clear that the woman is the one that's going to stay at home. But this type of flexible working time gives them the opportunity, so whichever parent chooses to stay at home, if it is the mother or the father, they could still work from home. So it still gives them a way to work and not just have to be there physically or feel guilty because they have to go and be with their child either way. And what I mean with new generations, so I'm going to put us in the same generation again, like our generation's lifestyle, we care more about work-life balance than our parents' generation. We don't want to work all the time, right? You also want to have a life, right? You can maybe no, I don't know. Yes, that's what you want, that's what you should want, okay? So like a healthy work-life balance, and if we adapt these flexible working models, also with working part-time, that's what we're supporting. And that's definitely a trend that I see happening with, now I'm gonna separate our generation maybe a little bit. So I'm a little bit older than you, so many of my friends are getting married, they're having children. So what they want is they don't want to just work and never see their children. They want to spend some time with their children too. And the ones that aren't married is also just about like, they don't want to just work, they want to maybe travel, they want to follow their hobbies, they want to do other things than just go to work. We don't live to work anymore, we work to live. And that's something that, like, it's not just my opinion, that has been my observation throughout. Oh, one more thing. What I mean with environmental, so obviously like we have a lot of traffic jams, so a lot of carbon monoxide issues, etc. So if we allow people to stay at home or to work from wherever, it's gonna make it easier so traffic will flow. Maybe here, not so much, we'll have to see, but some companies are doing that and it's definitely helping. Like for example, in Switzerland, there's a couple of big factories, and what they do is they have parts, like part of their stuff stays at home like the first 2 days, and the part stays at home the second 2 days, so it makes traffic a lot easier, so it flows more. So, this is how we're, like, I'm claiming this right now, so this is how we're going to work. So now we're getting into the second part of my presentation. If this is the type of working style that we would like to move towards, then what type of leadership does it need? What characteristics should a leader in this type of working environment have? What do you think? Sorry? Is the question clear? Yes? No? So maybe, what type of leader should we have in this type of environment? If people are working on their own whenever they want to, from where they want to, what important like characteristics or what important personality traits should we have? Clear, sorry? Clear and honest feedback, yes. What else? Communication, yes. Good communication skills, yeah. Very good. So just for those that are sitting in front and maybe didn't hear it very well, so a more trusting style, a more laissez-faire, not a very micromanaging and controlling style, obviously. So that's the word I was looking for, a trusting style. Because all of this doesn't work if there's no trust. So to just talk a little bit about what is happening right now or why there is a lack of trust. Because currently in business, this is our strategy. We feel that leaders are sacrificing others to save themselves. If you think about it, when a company hits crisis, the first thing that happens is layoffs. So people are let go. And the leaders continue, so the top management continues to get their high bonuses, continues to get their high salary. Whereas even though I wouldn't agree with many things in the military, but this is one thing that I think should be adopted to a business culture as well. Like, the leaders would sacrifice themselves for their people. So what do I mean by this? I'm going to tell you two different stories. I'm going to tell you two different stories that illustrate this problem. So, trust and cooperation, they're feelings. We can't force, we can't instruct people. I can't tell you, trust me, and then it's going to happen. Or I can't tell you, you need to cooperate with me. That's like, it's not going to be natural, and it's not going to work. So how do I mean this? It's not something that we can force people to do, but we feel that something is off, or we create it by feelings, is going to be illustrated by two stories. So one is a personal one from me. This happened in one of the companies that I worked in. We had a new CEO that just started the same year as I did, and a lot of things were not so good. So what he was doing was he would walk around on his coffee break and then just catch you when you were having your coffee and talk to you, have a chat. He'd be like, how are you? What are you doing? What are the challenges you're facing? Tell me. So made him pretty approachable, and I actually thought that was a very nice thing, because it doesn't feel like there's that much of a difference, and it feels like, oh, but we could all be in a nice environment. What happens is 2 3 weeks after he started doing this, there's an emergency department meeting. And it's not even in one of the official meeting rooms, but it's in the office of our department head. So we're all crammed in this office. And they start talking about, so our CEO, like, he likes to do that, he likes to ask you questions, but you need to make sure that you have to be careful about what you say. So everyone's like, oh, of course. And I was like, so you're basically telling us we should lie? And they're like, no, 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 no. We're not telling you you should lie. Like, just be careful what information you share. And to me, that was absolutely baffling because I was like, he's making an effort to find out what the actual situation is. And you're telling us, no, 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 we cannot have that because that's gonna reflect bad on us. But, and I mean, yeah, for me that was really shocking. And that's not the kind of like environment I wanted to stay, obviously, because if there's no transparency, or as we've heard before, like honesty, that's what happens. You feel like there's things that can't be shared, even though we work in the same company. And people often feel that way. That's not the only example I would have. So, and then another example. I mean, I could use my own example again from the current company, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to use another example from another industry, a manufacturing industry. Basically what happened when the crisis hit, they lost a lot of customers. Clearly they didn't have, so they needed to save $10 million. And as usual, when the board was meeting, the first suggestion was like, okay, we have to let people go. That's usually the first strategy that companies adopt when they need to save money. And that's again, so we're sacrificing our people to save us. But this CEO had a different idea. He said, no, we cannot do that. We're not gonna let anyone go. We have to come up with a different solution. So the solution they came up with is that every single person in the company, from junior level up to himself, so the CEO, needed to take 1 month of unpaid vacation. So 1 month without salary. And this way they would save the money. What happened and what people didn't expect is that, for example, people that were single would tell people with families, I'm gonna take 2 of your weeks, so you only have to take 2 weeks without pay because you have a family to feed. And that's not something you can force other people to do. That happens naturally if you have a working environment of trust. Like cooperation and trust comes from actions like this. Okay? So, who would you like to work for? Who would like to work for the first organization I talked about? Good. What? No. Hopefully not. The second one, the manufacturer with the unpaid vacation. Okay, who would like to work for the second organization? 3 people. Okay. Hopefully everyone, right? We want to work in an environment where we feel safe. Okay. So, if we want to be that type of leader, that type of, if you want to have that type of leadership that inspires trust, this is what I do. So there's different ways of how we can achieve this, but for me personally, this is what works. So I would say there's 3 ingredients. The first one is transparency. That's something that is also quite hard here, and I often hear people say, no, 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 but I cannot share like the challenges I face with my team. And I understand where the worry comes from, because it's also about letting go of control, but at the same time, it's not something that we want. Then inclusion and motivation. So to give a little bit more details, as we said, I would like not just to share what went well, like these are our successes, but also the challenges. So not only to get inputs from the people to see what is going to go well, or what they think could change it to make it better, but also if something is off in the company, people know, like for those of you that have worked, like something's off, and then people start to gossip, and what happens is there's a lot of stories around and people are worried. So people will know either way, but you'd rather have them know the actual situation than having them to make up their own mind. If people get not calm, what they do is they leave. And we know that here there's a very high turnover. So for this one, again in this market with Cambodians, sometimes it can be difficult. So to be fair, I haven't had a Cambodian boss so far. So I mean, in my company, obviously it's me and my partner. We're both Europeans, and in the universities I work at, they're also foreigners. So I don't really know how it would look like from that side, but from my side, what I see is, at first they're confused. They were like, why are you telling me this? Why do I need to know this? And sometimes they get worried. They're like, ooh, and they don't dare really to, same thing as with the feedback, they don't dare to really give a lot of input of what could be done differently. But it's again something when you, do it a couple of times, they grow and they get more confident. Like every time they say something, it gets like more, you can feel that they feel more open and more confident about saying something. Then what I mean with inclusion, and this is something that people are usually very, very apprehensive about, include them in the decision-making process. So by this, I don't necessarily mean that they have to make the decisions. So for some areas, maybe if we're talking about the marketing strategy, I'm not a marketing expert. Then I'm wondering, should I really be the one that calls the shots? So my marketing people, let's say, they probably know much better what the actual thing is. So I include them in the whole discussion. And that it's not, doesn't only inspire trust, but you know how it feels like when someone actually gives you responsibility. And when someone makes you part of, the decisions, the way that your company will go. We were talking about the vision and the mission before. If you're part of co-creating that, aren't you going to be more committed to the company? Of course you are, because you helped develop it. You helped get there. You helped choose the goals. And even if you're not the one that makes the maybe final decision in some cases, it still makes you feel more valued if you are part of the decision-making process. It's like, if you think about it in very simple terms, if your friend asks you for your opinion, how does it feel? It feels really good, because you know they value your opinion. And it's that simple. It's the same in professional level too. If you ask people for their opinion, they're gonna feel like you value it. And then of course, yeah, like as I said, that's something that not even here, but also in Europe, people are very, very apprehensive about. They're like, but people don't understand, or they will not be able to make the right decision. But at the same time, it's like, it's actually not true, because people get more and more into it, they get more information if you include them. That's been my experience. Again, it's very subjective, this part. So, and last but not least, what I mean with motivation is, we talked about it before, so you know what motivates your people. Some people are more reward-oriented, some people like to be recognized, and we know some people are more threat-oriented, so the closer the deadline, the harder they work, and I think that's very true for students. If you think about it, the closer the assignment deadline, the more you're going to work on it, right? And it applies for some projects in the work world too. So you need to know that. You need to know what makes your people tick. And then what I do as well is, so I delegate tasks, and not just tasks I don't want to do, but tasks that are actually important and have, have a meaning, have a lot of responsibility. Because if someone entrusts you with something that is important, what you feel is like, oh, but I need to be serious, I need to live up to this. And it again inspires a sense of like trust, and you're motivated because you see that someone is actually making you grow, that someone is actually giving you opportunities to do more than just what you've been doing so far. So, to finalize this, I would just like to ask you, would you like to be an authority? So if you run your own business, would you like to be an authority, someone people have to follow because they don't have another choice? Or would you like to be a leader that people follow because they want to? Thank you.
Would like to open the floor for Q&A. Any question from the audience? Yes, Mr. Kim. Question?
How valuable is military sense of leadership with corporate sense of leadership? Unlike military, corporate they don't have a specific cost to fight for, just for economic purpose. But in military terms, they all have a specific cost. So what I'm saying, how relevant can the sense of leadership
it's very relevant because we've seen where this type of leadership that we had right now, even when we were talking about the different societies, more masculine, so more fierce, competitive, and let's say more feminine, so more nurturing, inclusive, even though I don't really like these terms, but we've seen where the leadership that we've currently had, the more ruthless and more cost-saving leadership has brought us where we are right now. It's even more relevant that we change the style of leadership that we have adapted. So that's why now there's so many people or so many companies and corporations requesting types like ethical leadership or emotional intelligence. That's, for example, for trainings, that's one request we get a lot now. Here, so I'm talking about Cambodia, and in Europe it's the same thing. So people value a different set of leadership now more than before. And again, yes, there's a little bit of a generational gap. There's some people that are a little bit more old school and believe it should go this way, but again, they're more in the downwards. They're the ones that are going to retire in the next couple of years. So the newer body and us, the the younger people, we know that there's a different type of need for leadership.
Question? Please raise your hand.
At Yahoo, Marissa Meyer, she because Yahoo was very much a rogue type of workspace where people would work from home and did not come to the office. And Marissa Meyer, when she came in, she actually turned it around and forced people to come to the office more because it affected the company culture. What is the right balance? Of course, you couldn't say depends, but what in your opinion is the right balance, and what is what are the dependencies of how much space should you give people to work from home versus in office?
I mean, so what I read about Yahoo and Best Buy actually did the same thing, was that there was internal issues in the company, so people were abusing the system. And if it's, obviously, like if it's a smaller company like mine, it's very easy you see immediately if someone is not doing their part. Whereas in a bigger corporation, it's much more difficult. So you actually need to, what helps is like a peer-controlled system. So there's a couple of organizations that are using it that are bigger, that have peers controlling peers, and that helps much more than just the managers checking if they're doing theirs. Because if someone is not going to do their part, the peers will know, like your colleagues will know, and they will not be covering it for too much. And yes, I mean, I wish I could give a more specific answer, but it really depends. It depends on the size of the company, and depends a lot on the company culture. So depends on what their internal issues are. It depends on, what their company culture is like, and yeah. So what I would suggest personally is a mixture, as I'm doing it now, or we're doing it now as well. You cannot just do flex time or home office. That's not possible, because you're still going to need to meet people, you're still going to need to work together. So there's still going to be times where you're going to have to be physically in an office or in a space where you are together. And also, it can be, because then the times you're together, it's also going to be more fun, because if you just work flex time and from home, it can get a little bit lonely. So you won't really have much of interactions or physical interactions with others. So definitely I would recommend a blended approach. So it's kind of like, it feels like a cop-out, because it's like, it depends and you should do both, but that's basically my recommendation.
One last question from the audience. Okay. So it seems like everything is clear. If you want to approach Ms. Jelena later on for some more questions, please do. So I'm going to call on Joe and Sam Ning. Please projector. Do that manually.
Not for me, not for enough. Oh,
In the middle.
what's that?
The middle.
Ah, yeah. No, should be this one.
Yes.
All right, so Ms. Jelena, the Managing Director of Questify, we would like to award the Certificate of Appreciation in grateful acknowledgement for your expertise, professional competence, and invaluable service rendered as resource speaker during the 6th Entrepreneurship Sem held in Raffles International College, Phnom Penh, Cambodia, given this 29th of August, 2015. Signed, Mr. Jovan, myself, and the President of RBS.